ለመማር ወደ ትምህርት ተቋም መሄድ ግድ አይደለም።
ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
ራሳችሁን ከኮሮና ቫይረስ ወረርሽኝ እየጠበቃችሁ በቤታችሁ ወይም በተመቻችሁ ቦታ
በኢንተርኔት አማካኝነት በኦንላይን ትምህርታችሁን መከታተል ይቻላል።
ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና
ከእንግሊዙ ኢንስቲትዩት ኦፍ ኮመርሻል ማኔጅመንት ICM ጋር በመተባበር የሚሰጡ ትምህርቶችን ተከታትላችሁ በ6 ወር ጊዜ በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ ተቀባይነት ያለውን የስልጠና ማስረጃ ባለቤት መሆን ይቻላል።
ከኢትዮጵያ ሲቪል አቪዬሽን ባለስልጣን ሙሉ ዕውቅና ባገኘንባቸው የፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን እና የሆስተስ ስልጠናም በምዝገባ ላይ ነን።
ጥያቄና መልስ፣ የክፍል ስራዎች ብሎም ፈተና መፈተን ክፍል ውስጥ እንዳላችሁ አይነት
ልምድ ባላቸው መምህራን እየተማራችሁ
በኦንላይን ባላችሁበት ቦታ
አድራሻ ከ22 ማዞሪያ ወደ ሾላ ገበያ በሚወስደው መንገድ 150 ሜትር ገባ ብሎ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ
ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
Definitely, this foreign economic policy, you may not get it in one document in many of the countries. Because under it, there are a lot of things. One of my senior students came to me last year and he came with a title, Foreign Economic Policy Analysis. So this is big to you. No, doctor, this is small. I can do it. I have everything, he said. So remember, it's one of the big topics, the most interesting topics in the international relations course, and it's directly related to our discipline as well, okay? The foreign economic policy, chapter 4. The remaining 2 chapters, this is, I think, the widest chapter next to the first chapter. Under this chapter, we'll try to see, you know it's what a globalization and economic policy. So when you talk about foreign economic policy, we will see it within the framework of the recurring globalization issues. And then we'll see the concept of foreign economic policy, the subjects, and then what are the sectors, the types and the goals, and even the means of foreign economic policy. So I think within that, we can really incorporate the rest. I hope this concept is not new for you. I mean, this concept, when I say this is a concept of globalization, yeah. When we are talking about foreign economic policy in the time of globalization and without considering that, these are really two different things, okay? So what we can see here is highly divisive opinions, by the way. There is no a full-fledged opinion about foreign economic policy, how economic policy should be enacted from international perspective without compromising domestic interests, you know? This is one. So don't expect that there is one full-fledged and solid opinion. There are a number of debates. I think one of the contested debates these days is next to globalization and some forms of political systems is a issue of economic policy. What type of economic policy states should pursue in the international arena? We can mention some of them. For instance, some economists normally debate or argue that they say that the role of the state should be restricted to 3 functions. There should not be excessive foreign intervention, state intervention in the context of foreign economic policy. However, they really advise that, like making of laws, enforcing these laws, and prevention of violation of free market and trade rules. There is nothing, what you call it, the free market. We will see them, but actually they are really arguing that making laws, enacting laws, and enforcing laws from the context of maximizing the common interest. By the way, what economics says and what governors are implementing is totally contradictory. If we nicely apply the principles of economics, for example, the principles of free trade, I will show you there are a number of graphs maybe later. We can strongly believe that, okay, because the light is coming, that can really maximize welfare. Ultimately, what will be the goal of, even no one really agree on the goals of foreign economic policy. Many see it from very broader perspective, and they say that the goal of foreign economic policy should be maximization of the mass, maximization of welfare, not just for country X or country Y like that. This is actually the suggested issue, even in economic principles. However, countries are always look like kind of like selfish, and they really always try to see things from themselves, and then everything that they wanted to curb their economy, everything that they wanted to really focus and maximize their own citizens has its own backlash, and then it's its own negative effects. Moreover, even individual countries should perform these three functions in a uniform manner. In a uniform manner means, for example, if one country makes a law on the GMO or like that, the other country should have like that. If they are not making any uniform manner, according to these economists, they say there will be a loser and there will be the one that can maximize. So anyway, this idea, not only from the perspective of individual economists, but also from institutions like the Washington consensus, for example, it reflects this point of view that respecting the law and everything should act, but the reality may not be like that. However, under its terms, for example, under the Washington Agreement, the basic condition of equal participation in globalization of countries with an equal, you can imagine, equal is, you can better say it like equitable, level of economic growth is even deregulation. There should be a kind of deregulation. If we are deregulating it, then markets can really have its own forces and mechanisms of really reshuffling resources from less efficient sector or less efficient country to the other, which means the state has to renounce its interventionism. So the concept, when you talk about the concept of foreign economic policy, by the way, what happened to my slides? The concept of economics is normally connected with country's competence. It's not what really matters on the theory. It depends on the governance or the country's competence to make decisions on foreign economic relations. Okay, a number of advisors may see do that like that, but what's important is the country's competence. This competence is related to power, national power. I showed you last time. It really totally depends on number of international, foreign, and domestic factors. So the foreign economic policy normally signifies the influence that a state has on economic relations in the context of foreign affairs, even you can say that. When you say foreign affairs, the affair of, or the process of flow of capital, it can be the utilization of natural resources, and then the application of technology, and the interaction between all these things. Therefore, the government performs a double role in shaping foreign economic policy. Within all these contexts, what can the government do or governments do? Two things at least, like in addition to executive and decision making. What's executive and what's decision making? I hope it's not such a big thing. Anyway, when you talk about foreign economic policy, it's a big issue. I mean, the scope is big. So we have to see at least what are the points of intervention, or what are the sectors that the foreign economic policy should pursue is. We can mention a lot. If I ask you, if it's a classroom, I could have given you really a number of questions, and then you can try. By the way, can you tell me some of the sectors where economic policies, foreign economic policy can touch, or what are the sectors where we can play rules of the game related to foreign economic policy, or what are the sectors where countries can enact laws? So what are the sectors of foreign economic policy, or what are the issues that foreign economic laws can be addressed either by legislative or decision-making power? Anyone? At least two answers I expect from you.
We can call Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Foreign Affairs also, because it is working on economic diplomacy. We can also add Ministry of Justice.
That's good. Sectors of foreign economic policy. Good. When you talk about this is part of our foreign policy, not just specifically foreign economic policy. Very good attempt, Arella. Thank you. Any other person, any other one who is online? What do you think are the points of intervention for foreign economic policy, or what are the different sectors for playing rules of the game in foreign economic policy? I can mention like this. You are right. At least we can mention like this. Foreign trade policy. When you talk about foreign trade policy, it's part and parcel of the foreign economic policy, where countries can really develop interesting rules or really enhancing rules. When you talk about, again, foreign trade policy, it is the issue of what? Import and export policy. What is even export policy is one big document, by the way. Import policy is one another big document. So foreign economic policy, the first and the predominant sector with which countries can play a game on this is the foreign trade policy. What type of foreign trade policy should we have? That's one interesting thing. Another thing is the credit policy. Credit is an interesting. Credit normally fuels business, fuels the economy. That credit can be material credit or financial credit or input credit or technological. We can't really say a lot. Credit policy, foreign credit policy is an interesting policy. By the way, we can really have, let's say, credit. And then when do we say, for example, Ethiopia says that this is the maximum amount of credit that I have to get from country X? Should we really get as much credit as possible? Where is the limit, by the way? I also ask you this, and then I think you have to consider such things, at least for your title, for your master test, by the way. I tell you, there are a number of interesting issues on this. It is an untouched area. Where, you know, if you consider many of the African countries, they are really begging the other countries for debt relief. Where is the limit? Annually, what are the mechanisms, for example, the annual international debt for country X should be this much. What are the variables that need to be considered? What will be the ceiling, credit ceiling and credit floor? The floor is, at least normally, even any advanced country can really borrow any resource or like that. So please think on that one. There are a lot of issues. So try to also revisit, not only for this class, by the way. I want to really push you to really indulge on these issues, maybe for your consultancies, even for your work, and then you can really see credit policy is an important issue. The FDI policy, the foreign direct investment policy. When you say FDI, foreign direct investment, FDI inflow, for example, FDI inflow and FDI outflow. On which areas do we really work toward this? The enhancement of it. Should we really say that? Should we really throw the floors and whatever to the investors, to the Bole airport, and should we say that everybody should come and invest? Or what do you think will be the priority areas of? So this really requires policy. Do you think that Ethiopia has a FDI policy? I doubt, by the way. I made a lot of publications on this. We don't have really a comprehensive FDI policy. We can have such like incentive package or like that. We need to have a comprehensive FDI policy. What are the implications and what are the gaps? So one is inflow. The other thing is the outflow. FDI in two ways, you know. Foreign direct investments, when you say like that, investment that come from abroad and investment that go abroad, for example. What are the encouragements? And then what are the incentives? Let's say, what is the policy direction, for example? Mr. Yalellet, if you wanted to invest somewhere in Saudi Arabia, or let's say in let's say Israel or like that, what the policy says, for example. This is what we call it the FDI outflow policies, the FDI inflow policy and the FDI. These are the areas where one of the sectors of foreign economic policy. The other thing is migration policy. You may say, no, this is a population policy. No, migration. One of the most important actors or inputs in the economy is labor, knowledge, like that. What migration policy do we have, for instance? You can compare our sisters, how they are really going to the Arab countries, and even they are really doing a very big job compared to what the Sri Lankas are really saying, 3-4 times of Ethiopian salary. So where is that? You know, what's our migration policy? Then this migration policy again classified into two: the immigration and the immigration. You know this EM and the IM policy. Immigration means going out. The immigration means coming into. So on which policies, normally developed countries and developing countries, we will discuss all of them. So this is one area. The other thing is the foreign technological policy. This is also one of the sectors of foreign economic policy. For instance, transfer, intellectual property issues, like that. A very good example today is the GMO policy. No one is discussing on the genetically modified organism. That is a technology. For instance, fattening a chicken within 7 days and then eating it, or like that. This is a technology, you know. Technology is nothing but the combination of factors of production. How knowledge, inputs like cash, land, labor combined together. This is what we call technology. So what is our policy to the various technologies? Technological policy towards Ethiopia and technological policy out of Ethiopia. I have tried to take out some of the soil samples when I was doing my PhD in Benishangul Gumuz region. You cannot even take somehow kilograms of soil out of Ethiopia. Why are these proteins soil? What is our policy? This policy based on what I think.
ይሰማል ቢኒያም? ዶክተር ይሰማል?
አሁን ተቋርጬ ነበር።
ትንሽ እንትን አለ።
በጣም እኮ ይገርም ነው አንዳንዴ። Anyway, I am back. Thank you very much. So these are Can you hear me? ሰማችኋል?
ይሰማኛል ዶክተር።
Very good. So migration policy, we have seen it. I was there. And then the foreign technology policy. And then the foreign service policy. We can have, for instance, Ethiopian Telecommunication Corporation, Ethio Telecom. Somebody wanted to call to Germany from using Ethio Telecom or to make some fax or some, and like that. We can have a number of services. At least we can be a recipient of other countries. For instance, let me tell you the problem that Ethio Telecom faced in the previous, I think they have resolved it now, in the previous 4 and 5 years ago. Bini was also out.
Yeah. He was calling to me.
Yeah, I think he joined. So when you say foreign service, a number of service options. Like what you call it, the bank account, for example, bank account policy. Why don't we have, let's say, a saving account in, let's say, in pound? Or why don't we be a customer of the British bank or a customer of the Deutsche Bank of Germany, or like that? Kind of like that. You know, there are even the foreign service policy is one of the biggest areas or sectors of foreign policy where people or governments can really have a say. Please remember and try to contextualize it with our country. On which policy are we really familiar with? On which areas do we have a full-fledged policy? Ethiopia was mentioned policy, I tell you, a minor document, like they call it policy, like that, like some circulars or like that in the policy. Policy is, you know, what's the policy? Is a broad guideline under each that can have a strategy, that can have operational tactics, that can have whatever guidelines or whatever. The other thing is like, foreign technology policy. ወጣ ብዬ ነበር ወደ ሆነ ቦታና የኢትዮጵያ ገበሬዎች በጣም ማዳበሪያ በጣም የሚፈልጉበት ወቅት ነው። ማዳበሪያ የሚፈልጉበት ወቅት ነውና አንዳንድ የተማሩ ገበሬዎች አሁን ማዳበሪያው ዴሊቨር ሲደረግላቸው ሜድ ኢን ኢጂፕት ይላልና ደረጀ ዶክተር really do you trust this fertilizer? Because they relate it with the current context. The farmers are like that. Is it technology is good? Is it good for the soil or like that? What happened, for example, on Tana, in Lake Tana, is the unions that produce fish, they are getting different types of webs to really produce መረብ የሚባለው ማለት ነው. And then a number of damages were happening. We have suspect, you know, it's not like that. So we should really have a kind of direction on this. The domestic economic protection policy. This is the seventh sector of foreign economic policy. What are you saying? You are teaching us foreign economic policy, but you are talking about domestic. I say it protection. Protection from what? Foreign actors. This is foreign. Yeah. So these are the areas, by the way, እነዚህ ራሳቸውን የቻሉ ትላልቅ subject areaዎች ናቸው። ለእናንተ ትንሽ ፍላሽ ካረኳችሁ that will be really enough. Migration ፖሊሲያችን ምን ይመስላል? Credit ፖሊሲያችን ምን ይመስላል? FDI ፖሊሲያችን ምን ይመስላል? You can compare and contrast, like example, Kenya or with Burundi or Rwanda or like that, okay? In the context of Ethiopia, for example, you can be an expert, let's say, advisor of foreign service policy for Ethiopia. Somebody may be a specialized advisor of national credit policy. We have to say, Dr. Abiy, for example, until when are you really going to really borrow? Until where are we? And then what about Ethiopia? Can you tell me any countries that Ethiopia has lent some money or with or like that? What do you feel?
Still, we are
So
not,
that
I think we are not lending money for countries. For
But
states.
in my opinion,
yeah.
we as a country has been lending for Djibouti in terms of they will return it, but in terms of their በወደብ ኪራዩ አማካኝነት የሚመለስ ብድር የዛሬ 5 ዓመት ለኮንስትራክሽን ያበደር እና በድራለን ለሳውዝ ሱዳንም አሁን በቅርብ ጊዜ ያበደርን የሚል ነገር ሰምተናል ለኢንፍራስትራክቸር እና
yes, you are right. So what I am saying is በጣም ሌላ ሀገር በብዛት ሰው ብድር ሳይሆን USAID ቢሊየንስ እና ሚሊየንስ ያወጡ እዛ ሀገር ውስጥ በጣም ብዙ የተቸገረ ሰው አለ ባይዘ ጎዳና ላይ የሚያርጉሉ አለ እንደው when is a country that መቼ ነው ሀገር ወደ ብድር የምትሄድ ወደ ማበደር ወደ መበደር የሚለው and how is the interaction between these two things lending and borrowing, you know what I mean? እንትን ያስፈልገዋል. So I really ask you and urge you to revisit our countries for import. I think you are 7 or 8 like that. ያንዱ የናንተ ፋይናል ማስተር ቴሳችሁ I am sure you will work with እዚህ ላይ ቢሰሩ በጣም ብዙ ነገር ተጠቅማላችሁ ሌላው ማገላብጦታል ብዙ ሊትሬቸር ምናምን definitely can work. Do we have
Doctor,
yes
can we incorporate in foreign economic policy of our foreign affairs and national security policy?
Foreign affairs and
national security policy.
Yeah, they have an interface, by the way.
Is there some sort of correlation?
Yes, like there is an overlap, for example, national security. In terms of economy, national security ሚነካን ነገር አለ national security ደግሞ ከኢኮኖሚ ውጪ የሚወርበት ሁኔታ አለ like the intelligence ሁሉም ደግሞ በኢኮኖሚ ጋር የሚገናኝ ጋር ማግኘት ይችላል ግን ቶታሊ ያው national security national interest በጣም ብዙ ነው ከኢኮኖሚ በላቀ ሁኔታ ማለት ነው ግን predominantly ግን የኢኮኖሚ እና የሚሊተሪ ኢሹዎች የናሽናል ኢንተረስት ወይ የናሽናል ሴኩሪቲ bigger areas of playing ground ናቸው እና ኢንኮርፖሬት ማድረግ እንችላለን some part እንትን አለው ኢንተርፌስ ያደርጋል ወይም ደግሞ ኢንተርፕሌይ ያደርጋል definitely. Any other question?
In the past 27 years the foreign affairs and national security policy has designed in terms of eradicating poverty and bringing development in multi versatile direction. So
Exactly.
Can we say definitely the foreign economic policy of our country has a tendency to be correlated with our national and security affairs policy?
Definitely, yes. Not only in the context of Ethiopia, by the way. Even in many countries, you know what Trump has done against China? You can remember, yeah, about imports. That's the issue of, by the way, economy is a power. So we can say that working on economic interests means directly or indirectly it's national security, by the way. But እድገት ሲቀረች ሪሶርሷ በማንም የኮንጎን ኬዝ ማየት ትችላላችሁ። ብዙ ሀገሮች ፎሪን ዶሜስቲክ ወይም ደግሞ ዶሜስቲክ ኢንስቴቢሊቲ የተነሳባቸው አብዛኞቹ ሀገሮች ከኢኮኖሚክ ማተረጋ ማዕድንን ሀንት ከማድረጋ ይመጣል። ስለዚህ if they are really using technology transfer if we are not really manage የማናደርገውን ቴክኖሎጂ for example ወደ ሀገር ውስጥ ወይ ማስመጣን ማለት ነው ሌሎቹ እኛ ማኔጅ እንዲያደርጉን የነሱ ግዞተኛ ሆነን ነው ነው for example in case of our banks ብዙ ጥንቃቄ የሚያስፈልግባቸው ኤራዎች አሉ። ፎሪን ቴክኖሎጂ ፖሊሲያችን it should not compromise the national security policy. Of course, Ethiopia has a number of agreements with international security institutions like the Interpol or whatever. ቀላል እንዳይመስላችሁ ብዙ ነገር ነው ያለው። በጣም ብዙ ነገር ነው የሚገናኙ። የኢትዮጵያን ስፔስ ሳይንስ ፖሊሲ መውሰድ ትችላላችሁ። ኢትዮጵያ እንደፈለክ መንኮራኩር ላመጣት በጣም ብዙ ከቴክኖሎጂ ጋር የሚያያዙ መፈረም ያለባት ላይ ዘ ለምሳሌ ዩራኒየም ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ተገኝቷል ተብሎ በመንግስቱ ኃይለማርያም ጊዜ ነው ኢትዮጵያ ተገዳ እንድትፈርም አንቲ ኒውክሊየር ሙቭመንት እንዳይኖር ሀገሪቷ ውስጥ የተደረገው ማለት ነው። አሁን እነሱ ያቆታል እኛ ገና እናቀው ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ ይሄ ኒውክሊየር ይሄ ኒውትረንቱ በሙሉ ኢኮኖሚ ነው። ግን every country relates it. Even one of the biggest I can say almost 90% of the issue of the country's national security is related with economy. That's the most important thing. That's why we need to really emphasize on this and try, we need to really relate to that one, okay?
Okay.
So, Kaziwala, what we'll see is, we'll see one by one, except this one. I don't want to really cover on domestic economic protection policy, because there's one theory, the protectionist theory. Protection is available everywhere. We are really working with the import-export so that we may really encourage import promotion and export promotion and limit import to really protect our infant industry. So you can raise it. Even credit policy, when we are borrowing from outside, definitely we are not opening credit market to our domestic banks. So still domestic economic protection policy works here. So the seventh one is really, it's a lucid and the one that's really intertwined in the remaining 6 lists, okay? So you have to do that. But the rest we will see one by one. So foreign export policy. The first one is what? The foreign trade policy. Under foreign trade policy, we can have import and
export and import policies.
Yeah. When you say foreign trade policy, it refers to the attempts by the government to really shape and reshape the foreign commodity relations, and thus foreign trade turnover. That's what we call the foreign trade turnover. It includes like export policy and import policy. So we can say the export-import policy is what we call the foreign trade policy. So when it is export policy, the scope of export policy, it comprises, it says, the influence of the government or the influence of the state on the size of exports, okay? On the size means sometimes states can limit. Not all countries really promote export. Sometimes they limit that, yeah, our level of production is this much, our level of consumption is this much. So what do we export and what do we get like that? If we are strongly exporting, some countries, they say that no, if we are really emphasizing much on export, we are really working on the volume of production. If we produce much, definitely we are depleting our resources that can be used for future generations. So there is a limit, by the way. So we should not be limitless. That's one thing that. So when do you think, ask yourself this question. You can have your own question or you can have your own formula. When do you think will be the right amount of export volume? When it's expressed in terms of population, or when it's expressed in terms of GDP, or when it's expressed in terms of domestic, import, where, that's one thing. Many countries are working on. There are a number of economic questions that we can You can do that. So that's what limiting the amount. So the question is, what is the optimal level of export for Ethiopia? ለምሳሌ ኤክስፖርት እናድርግ ማት ካምፓኒ መጥቶ 100 ቢሊዮን ኤክስፖርት እናድርግ ቢል ኦኬ go ahead በጣም ኤክስፖርታችን አደገ 300 ቢሊዮን where is the limit? This is the issue of policy. So that's one we call it the foreign trade turnover. So the scope is what will be the influence of the state on the size of exports, not only on the size of exports, please, even on the quality of exports, even on the destination of exports, and even on the return of exports. They really export it, and then what is the return to that export? Even their structure, I mean, structure means, for instance, like how much percentage of on service export, how much percentage on semi-finished product, how much percentage on even on the smokeless industry, for example, like even the structure and even level of profitability. So this is very, very important. Sometimes we may think of big profit, however, that may really damage our country's economy or that country's economy in the long run. So the aim of export policy can, I say, consequently it can have a short or a medium as well as long-term horizon. So export policies should be designed from short-term perspective with a little weight to short-term, but mainly to the medium and the long term. Because without having the short-term effects, you cannot achieve the medium-term or the long-term. So we have to see. So export policy analysis, in terms of time, you can see it in terms of time horizon, you can see in terms of size, you can see it in terms of structure. What is the healthiest export structure, for example? 50% agriculture, 20% industry, or 10%? Like this is a big question. It depends on the economic status, on the geographical location, or accessibility to sea and port. በጣም እዚህ ላይ ብዙ ምርምር የሚደረግበትና ብዙ ሊሰራበት therefore in the short term, so we can see it even in the short term, the states can stimulate or even stifle means restrict or restrain the size of exports. For example, these are the short term interventions like size of export volume, I mean the export volume, even intervening when the need arises sometimes, and then it will release it. Like it can be temporary. Assume domestic production of food items, when it is really low, many countries, they will discourage export, and they had, even sometimes they may ban export. When they ban export, at least they can stabilize the domestic demand and supply. This is what you call it. Please unmute አድርጉ. This is what you call it, the short-term moment. So with oriented production growth, for example, the possibilities of sales and the possibilities abroad, they will be really considered. In the medium term, the focus of export policy is just to influence export of goods by shaping the commodity and geographical structure of foreign trade. The short-term focus is size of exporters and timing of exporters. The medium-term target is shaping of the commodity structure. The commodity structure means, let's say, what type of agriculture, let's say, that's what we call it structure, the share. Even geographical structure means not only for China, not only for Turkey, like that. Like, let's change our destination. This is what we call the medium term.
በትምህርት ከፍ ብሎ መብረር ይቻላል። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ከከፍተኛ ትምህርት አግባብነትና ጥራት ኤጀንሲ ሙሉ ዕውቅናን ባገኘንባቸው በማስተርስ ዲግሪ ኤምቢኤ በስትራቴጂክ ማኔጅመንት፣ ኤምቢኤ በባንኪንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ ኤምቢኤ በቢዝነስ ሊደርሺፕ፣ MBA በሪስክና ኢንሹራንስ፣ MSc በኢንተርናሽናል ትሬድና ኢኮኖሚክስ ዘርፎች በእውቀት ለመቅረጽ የበቁ ፕሮፌሰሮቻችን አረንጓዴ መብራታቸውን አብርተዋል። በነገራችን ላይ በኬንያ ሀገር ከሚገኙ ስመጥር ዩኒቨርሲቲዎች በሚመጡ ፕሮፌሰሮች የትኩረት መስክ ትምህርቶቹ መሰጠታቸው ልዩ ያደርገናል። በምርጥ የትምህርት ስርዓት የተገነባው ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ በመጀመሪያ ዲግሪ በአቪዬሽን ማኔጅመንት፣ በሆቴል ማኔጅመንት፣ በአካውንቲንግና ፋይናንስ፣ በማርኬቲንግ ማኔጅመንት አስተማማኝ ትምህርት ይገቢውና ራስዎንና ሀገሮን ይለውጡ። አድራሻ 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
And finally, in the long term, the state can affect exports through changes to the structure of domestic production, technological progress, and economic growth rate. So if I ask you, for example, the goal of export policy means goals and something that's related to the long-term one, which means domestic production, like changes to the structure of domestic production. What's the structure of domestic production? Yeah. For instance, GDP. GDP is the composition of many things. It is an aggregation of what? Let's say different sectors. So the share of the structure of that GDP to be reshuffled to a more efficient, For example, ላለፉት 10-15 ዓመታት ከማንኛውም ሴክተር በላይ በኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ የሰርቪስ ሴክተሩ በዶሜስቲክ ፕሮዳክሽን ስትራክቸር ላይ በጣም አፐር ሃንድ እያሳየ የመጣበት ጊዜ አለ። ይሄ እንደዚህ ቀጥል ወይስ እንዴት እናርግ የሚለው ነገር ማየት ነው። The government is really trying to really support the service sector, but in the opposite, the manufacturing and the industry sector is really sluggish. So the government can use a number of incentives in the long run to really reshuffle the structure of the domestic production, mainly in favor of what? In favor of industries like that. So now, the incentives that the government of Ethiopia, for example, provides for service sector is for the manufacturing sector is totally unrelated. People that are really joining this time for the manufacturing sector, they are really encouraged by a number of incentives, okay? I know this. Even in terms of technological progress and in terms of economic growth rate. This is what I call it the foreign export policy. The next one is the foreign trade policy, where I mean the import policy, import foreign policy. Sometimes it's awkward to say like this. You want to English like foreign import policy. I mean import from abroad policy. Normally, the scope of import policy covers the influence. Still, it is the same. Normally, the long run target is acceleration of the growth rate or the growth of the country in domestic, and then in the medium term is like increasing wages and improving payments, or ultimately increasing the income of the local people or the income of citizens. So foreign trade policy is already, I mentioned it, the summation of what? Foreign export policy, I mean export policy and import policy. The other intervention area or sector where foreign economic policy can be discussed is the foreign capital policy, or the foreign credit policy, you can say like that. It focuses on the effort of the states toward the shaping the capital movement from and into the country. From and into, remember, from which could be our development partners, capital flow or like that. Normally, this really depends on the strengths of the country. Strengths, economic strengths, or political strengths, or weak on each other. Capital ከየትም flow መጥቶ በሮ በቃ እንደው አለ አይደለ ማንም አሞራ የሚያርፍበት አይነት ዛፍ ነው የምትሆነው ማለት ነው። Strength is very, very important. So the foreign capital policy, normally it includes the credit policy, and this policy, it concerns like directly or indirectly, it really related to foreign direct investment. For example, if there are some investors that come from abroad, do we expect these investors to come like 100% capital coverage, or are we really going to really cover some of their costs, or how much would be the maximum amount of investment by a single investor? Can you tell me this for Ethiopia? Anyone who has an awareness? Can anybody, let's say, like $200 billion invest will? Do we have any policies that says, no, ያንተ ገንዘብ በጣም ብዙ ነውና ሀገሪቷን ራሱ ነው ምንለው ሊገዛት ይችላል? No ways. Oh, we are lucky. Yes, Mr. Warren Buffett, you are one of the richest person in the world. Welcome with this. Can we say like that? Or progressively ነው የምንሰራው? Progressively ደግሞ በጣም ኢንስቴብል የሆኑ ካንትሪዎች መለኪያ ነው። ጥያቄው ሲመጣ ነው ሼፕ የምናደርገው or are we really ready? How many countries do you think are ready for all these things or like that? Or
some foreign direct investment ላይ የመንግስት ኢንተርቬንሽን አለ ኤግዛክት አማውንቱን ገንዘቡን አማውንት ባላቆም ከልማት ባንክ ጋር በማገናኘት ፕሮጀክቱ የመንግስትን እጅ ለመጠምዘዝ የሚቻል መንገድ እንደሚቀይሱ ኢንፎርሜሽን አለኝ ዶክተር
Very good. So remember, it's you. You are the inputs definitely for this country, at least to really to have policy analysis on this, all policies. How is our policy looks like on this one? Okay. Substance ያለው ነገር ነው በእርግጠኝነት አሁን ሙሉ እዚህ ላይ ቢወያይኮ ይሄ በጣም ብዙ ነገሮች ማግኘት ይቻላል። ግን ያው እንደምታዩት ነው እንዳልከው ቢኔ ያለ ኢንቨስትመንቱ ላይ ማቃቸው ነገሮች አሉ። እኔ አንድ ኤግዛምፕል ያው ደጋግሜ ነግራችሁ ሊሆን ይችላል ካጠናዋቸው ጥናቶ በጣም እንግዲህ አምባሳደሮች በጣም የምትሸለሙ ዝም ብሎ የፖለቲካ ስራ ብቻ በመስራት አይደለም ትልቁ ነገር ኢኮኖሚክ ዲፕሎማሲ ነው ተብሎ አምባሳደሮች በጣም የሚፈተሹበትና የሚገመገሙበት ነገር የአምባሳደር ያለባት ሀገር ምን ያህል ኢንቨስትመንት ወደ ኢትዮጵያ ያስመጣ ነው ይሄ የኬንያም ሁሉ የሚያደርጉት ነው እና አንዳንዶቹ በጣም በዚህኛው ፍራስትሬት እና ወደ ኮምፒቲሽን ከመግባታቸው የተነሳ በጣም በቃ ኢትዮጵያን ገነት አድርገው ያቀርቡላቸው ኢንቨስተሮች አሉ ኢትዮጵያ ሲመጡ ደግሞ ትንሽ ቻሌንጅ ይገጥማቸዋል በዚህ ምክንያት አምፕል ላንድ አለ ይሏቸዋል በጣም ያልተጠቀምንበት እጅግ አምፕል ላንድ ፈርታይል ላንድ አይዳው ኮንሲስ ፍሪ ላንድ ተብሎ ይመጣሉ ኢንቨስተሩ እና ወደ 50,000 ሄክታር እኔ ፕራክቲካሊ የሰራሁበት ፔፐር ስለሆነ ይመጣሉ ሲያዩ 50,000 ሄክታር ዋው this 50,000 ሄክታር I am lucky and ያንን የተቀበሉ ቀን ሰውየው ይሄ እኮ የተቀበልኩት መሬት እኔ ከተወለድኩበት ኢንዲያ በጣም ከቪሌጅ 5-6 እጥፍ ይሆናል አለ በቃ I am the luckiest investor because this is a big land so he said and then he didn't check the land and then finally he sent some of the messengers and then he later came free land you know what is really free land is the most interesting issue do you think for example indigenous people የሚኖሩበት ያ land free land ነው forest ያለበት land is it really a free land and then even biodiversity በአብዛኛው ያለው free land you know that's በዚህ ምክንያት በ5 አመት ውስጥ ያንን 50,000 ሄክታር መሬት እንዲያለማ ሰውየው አግሪ ያደርጋሉ ቢገርማችሁ በ5 አመት ውስጥ ማክሲመም ያመረቱት እንትን 1600 ሄክታር ብቻ ነው ከ50 1600 why because we are only looking the incomers you know የሚመጡትን ብቻ ነው የምናየው we didn't make it ready for that ሲያውት አብዛኛው መሬት ውስጥ የጉሙዝ ኮሚኒቲ ይኖራል የሽናሻ ኮሚኒቲ ያለ ፍሪ የተባለው ላንድ ፍሪ ላንድ አይደለም ስለዚህ አንዳንድ ጊዜ የፎሬን ካፒታል ፖሊሲ አገር ውስጥ ያለው የሪሶርስ ማኔጅመንት ፖሊሲያችን በጣም እየመታውና እየጎዳው ያለ አካል ነው ስለዚህ ሬዲ መሆን የሚጠብቃል readiness assessment in terms of capital investment or movement of capital investment በዚህ ምክንያት after 5 years the person really was obliged no you didn't fulfill your contract 50 hectare ko 50 hectare አለማለው ብለ ነበር ምንድነው ሲባል Ethiopian land is very difficult it's a very virgin land and then even one of the tree is very big to remove that I have to bring big machines from this country so like that blah blah he said and then generally masalachu we call it in economics I hope you know it in business investment suitability analysis. And one of the most important areas where this investment suitability analysis should be made is land suitability analysis. Which land is suited for that? Which investment is suitable to that? Then we should see it just from short term, mid term, and long term. And finally, that person, he really claimed the land, and then encroachment has come from highland Ethiopia. Encroachment means small scale farmers, they come and they were pushing him because he is not really working on that. And then finally, the contract is almost cancelled. And now he shouted a lot, and then the contract from 50,000, it comes to 10,000. He didn't make it in 1 year. Again, it comes to 5,000. He didn't make it on the additional 1 year. Now it becomes 3,000. I am very happy that the remaining 47,000 hectare becomes one of the biggest parks in Western Ethiopia. Yeah. The problem that we have is ethnic problem. Some of them say that in their own language, Kusa, they say it, let's say the Kusa part. Kusa malet, the other says, no, it's not a river, it is a park, they say. Bejimis in Valoa. Yeah, there are some clans there. The other says Aujemis. So still, I tell you, this problem is not solved. Anyway, things really become complex if you really relate it with some minor and then some like more ethnic. ይሄ ካፒታል ኢንቨስትመንት ሙሉ ከዛ በኋላ ሊስተካከሉ የሚገባቸው የኢንቨስትመንት ጋር የተያዙ ስራዎች እንደው አይ ቴል ዩ ያ የፓርክ ጉዳይ በጣም ሪክሌም ተደርጎ 2 ዓመት ከቆየ በኋላ እጅግ በጣም የጠፉ አንበሶች ሳይቀር ከሱዳን እነ ቢቢሲ ሳይቀር የዘገቡት ጉዳይ ነው። ወደ ኢትዮጵያ ሚግሬት አድርገው የመጡበት በጣም ከፍተኛ የሆነ የባዮዳይቨርሲቲ ጌን ለዛ ኢንቨስተር ሰጥተን ከምናገኘው ምርት እጅግ በጣም የተሻለ የዓለም አቀፍ የባዮዳይቨርሲቲ ምርምር ተቋም እና ለኢትዮጵያ በጣም እጅግ የተሻለ ከፍተኛ የሆነ ሃርድ ከረንሲ የሚያስገኝ እንደሆነ ነው። እና what I am saying is ይሄ ሁሉ የሆነው ለመሰላችሁ based on this እንኳን ፈተሽ አድርገው we have to have some important like policies, for example. I mean land suitability ያልኳችሁ ማለት ነው። አሁን ያ area is not suitable for commercial farming. But since land coverage is very undulating feature, undulating means the ups and downs, የተወሰነ ነገር ስላለው በዛ ማለት ይቻላል። So what I am saying is suitability. So you should not only see the foreign, but also our readiness from domestic really matters well. Okay, so investment analysis is like the investor's profile or like that. For example, some countries they say that when they see that majority of the investors are coming from one country, they start to limit, oh, we are invaded by, like they say, like one country, like in Tanzania happen, Tanzania, but I may happen to Nasa, investors and Nakai dominate Kamaraga to Nasa, much as city established Argomacha, even Castra Matwara, Parliament Marat, Yamzego and Scamantas. Him and Marat, Alamandi Jonas again. Really, shouldn't we have like a kind of limit or really the origin of investors? Check foreign credit policy it comprises of policy contracting credits abroad and the policy of extending credits abroad. From the point view of even time horizon, the short term, the mid term, long term, the short term credit policies in the long term they will be cancelled in like that. The FDI policy already discussed. The other thing is the migration policy. I make the note very detailed because I don't want you to be busy with searching this note. So note to a like kind of PowerPoint which just I somehow baki hona reading in Norachu, Mandan so to make a. So when you say migration policy, it's about the influence of the states. Policy is always the influence of the state, the intervention of the state, the role of the state on the flow or movement of people between the country and other countries. What is the Ethiopian policy in terms of movements, for example? movement, moving in and moving out. Do we have that? I know we have migration policy, but that migration is all about population policy. They say that one of our migration policy says, since we are not conserving natural resources well, so people are leaving the rural areas, become unproductive, and then following that, people are really migrating from rural to urban. Therefore, our intervention area should be just conservation of land. That's good, but when we talk about migration policy, it's not just simply the one. It's a neglected area in terms of policy, by the way, our foreign policy in terms of migration. Of course, የኢሚግሬሽን እና የዜጎች ደህንነት ባለስልጣን አለ። ፓስፖርት ከመስጠት ምናምን ጋር በተያያዘ ብዙ የሚሰሩ ስራ አለ። ባይ ዘ ወይ ግን not just handling passport, we should really see that one. ዜጎቻችን በእኛ ምን ያህል በፖሊሲያችን ምን ያህል the center of our policy ናቸው። ለዛ ቢሆን ነው ወይ really our sisters ከምን ላይ እስኪወለወሉ ድረስ እና ይሄ በጣም ትልቅ ኢንተርቬንሽን ኤሪያ ነው። So migration policy, remember our course is foreign policy, foreign economic policy, but migration really plays a role. So we can see it in terms of long term and short term. When they short-term migration policy, normally it focuses on cross-border and seasonal migration of workers. It's not common, for example, in Ethiopia, if you go to Italy and if you go to Spain, France, but in the seasons like many laborers are required for really picking grapes, even strawberries, berries, and the like. Labor force, there is a huge migration of labor even daily from, let's say, Malmö, Sweden to Copenhagen, just 30-something kilometers. Daily, there is a huge movement because majority of the laborers in Copenhagen, there is labor shortage, they are already coming from, and then ይመጣሉ ግን ሰርተው ውለው በኮፐንሃገን ዴንማርክ ሰርተው ሄደው የሚያድሩት it's how many like 20 kroner means divided by 8 during that time almost 2 euros for transport እንደዛ ብሏል። ስለዚህ ይሄ even daily ነው, not every year but also even daily የምናደርገው cross border. For example, what's our cross-border policy? If some people, they want to come from Kenya and work to Ethiopia, if some Ethiopians want to go to Sudan or somewhere, and then like that, do we have that seasonal really policy? That's a very, very interesting. We have to think it for the future. Most of the labor force in Europe is really dwindling from time to time. Here, Akafana Domaizo, Mikomo, and Muchachin, you will see that in the near future. Like war in millions of laborers, it will be required in many other countries. So we have to make our human resource, at least language in the Chilu, awareness in that respect, we have to do really disciplined work. I know that there are a number of Ethiopians, sometimes they went to Switzerland, they went to even China and like that. But now the rivers, really many Chinese are really coming. Of course, welcome to that. But do we really have that? I can remember one of the biggest construction projects in Ethiopia. And then when the construction is signed with the Chinese company, they say that except this, the rest will be Ethiopian employees, they say. But finally, almost every position on that project is filled with Chinese. And those promises that contractor has done, he has nothing. We cannot ask him that person because we do not have the policy from the beginning to that things. So እያንዳንዱ ፕሮጀክት እና ስራ ላይ ያለው ነገር ምንድነው? ኮንትራክቹዋል ቤዝድ አግሪመንቶች ነው እንጂ ያሉት እንደዚህ ዝም ብሎ ዲስከስ ተደርጎ ፖሊሲው እና ወደ ሄድ የሚተሩ then what's your policy? And then internationally like ክርክር ቢነሳው do you have that policy first? This very critical issue, by the way. And then like that, yeah.
Can I intervene, please?
Yes.
But we have a policy regarding human trafficking and labor.
Human trafficking and labor, yes.
Yeah, especially in labor law, some workers are reserved for Ethiopians only.
Yeah.
foreigners will not be allowed to come and join and work on such reserved areas. But they took these areas.
Can you mention some?
ለምሳሌ ቴክኒክ በዚህ ሀገር ሙያተኛው ካልጠፋ በስተቀር ብለው የሌበር ማለት የጉልበት ስራ የምናምን ላይ መግባት አይችሉም። ግን ቻይናዎቹ ለምሳሌ አያት አካባቢ ባንድ ወቅት የቤት ሰራተኝነቱን ጀምረው ነበር።
ተመልከት።
ያ ግን እንትን አይደለም በህግ ተፈቅዶላቸው ሳይሆን ሌሎች ሀገሮች የኛም ዜጎች ሄደው እንደሚሰሩት ህጋዊ ሳይሆኑ ለምሳሌ እዚህ ሀገር ዲፕሎማቶች ይመጣሉ ቤተሰቦቻቸውን ሎካል አድርገው በኤምባሲዎቹ በኢንተርናሽናል ኦርጋናይዜሽኖቹ ያስቀጥራሉ። በህግ ግን ሎካል ስታፍ የሚባለው ሀገሬው ነው።
ኤግዛክትሊ ኢቭን ሳላሪው ቢሆን በሃርድ ከረንሲ አይደለም።
ወደዚህኛው በሃርድ ከረንሲ ቢከፍሏቸው በብር ነው ለነሱ የሚደርሰው። እንዲከፈል
የሚቆጣጠር አካል የለም ሬጉሌሽኑን የሚሰራ
አለ። ግን ያው የእንትን እያልክ ነው ከተቋሞቹ ጋር ነው በብዛት የሚሰራው እንጂ እነዚህ አሁን የኢትዮጵያ የመንግስት ፕሮጀክቶች ሲሆኑ ምናልባት ምንድነው ሊደረግ የሚችለው ነው የሚገባኝ የሆነ ሙያ በዚህ ሙያ የተመረቀ ብለው ስፔሲፋይ ያረጉትና ኢትዮጵያውያን ያን
አሁን ያለለት ላቋርጥክና የኢትዮጵያን ኤርላይንስ ኤክስፓንሽን ፕሮጀክቱን አንተም እኔም ያው ኤርላይንስ ስንሄድ ያየነው ነገር ሊሆን ስለሚችል ነው። ከተራ ሌበር ጀምሮ እስከ በያጅ ድረስ ኢትዮጵያውያን አልነበረም ሲሰሩ የነበሩት። እኔ በሚሄድበት ጊዜ የምመለከተው ቻይኖች ነበሩ የሚሰሩት እና ይሄ ኮንትራክቹዋል አግሪመንት ውስጥ ኢንኮርፖሬት የተደረገ አግሪመንት ሊሆን ይችላል ወይስ ፖሊሲው
በፖሊሲ ይደገፋል ብዬ አላስብም። ግን ምንድነው የሚሆነው ለምሳሌ እነሱ ኢንጂነሮች ሲመጡ ኤክስካቫተርም ይነዳሉ ብየዳም ይሰራሉ ሙሉውን ስራ ሊሰሩ ይችላሉ። መልቲ ፐርፐዝ ሆኖ ይመጣሉ። ግን የሚመጡበት ሙያ ስፔሲፊክ ይሆናል። ለምሳሌ ለኢንጂነሪንግ ስራው ሊመጡ ይችላልና ግን ታችኛውንም ስራ ጠቅልለው የመስራት ነገር ያለማሳተፍ ይኖራል። ከዛ ውጭ ግን ሊያደርጉ የሚችሉት በሆነ ዘርፍ የመጣ ሰው እዛ ውስጥ ያው ኢሌጋሊ ነው እየገባ የሚሰራው እንጂ እንደዚህ አይነት አግሪመንት ይፈርማል ብዬ አላስብም። ሳምታይምስ ግን የዶነሩ ፍላጎት የሚጠበቅበት ሁኔታ ሊኖር ይችላል።
because the fund will be financed by another
በሱ ሊያስገድድ ይችል ይሆናል ብዬ አስባለሁ።
by the way most of real genuine የሆኑ ዶኔሽኖች እና ክሬዲቶች ብዙ ጊዜ genuine ከሆኑ በቃ በተቻለ መጠን ራሳችሁ ካፓሲቴት አድርጉ። በነገራችን ላይ ከእናንተ አሁን ከሁለታችሁ ኮንቨርሴሽን ያገኘሁት በጣም ኢንተረስቲንግ ነገር ምንድነው ወደ ተቋማቶቻችን ራሱ የምንወስዳቸው ለምሳሌ ስናሰለጥን እንዳላችሁ ጀነራሊስት አድርጎ የማስወጣት ቴክኒክና ሙያ ስኩሎቻችን even somehow excel ያደረጉ የፖሊቴክኒክ ዩኒቨርሲቲ አንድ እንኳን የለንም። በነገራችን እዛ ላይ ብዙ መስራት ለነኚህ ፖሊሲዎች ግብአት ይኖራል ብዬ እንትላለውና በጣም አሪፍ ነገር ነው። በነገራችን ላይ አትሊስት ከዚህ ተወስዶ ወደ ኤጁኬሽን ይወሰድ ፖሊሲ ይኖራል። there is very interesting። በነገራችን ላይ ብዙ ብናወራ ብዙ ማድረግ ይችላል እዚህ ላይና እንደው ታይም ሴቭ ለማድረግ ይቀጥል። therefore በነገራችን ላይ እዚህ ላይ በሲዝኑ in the short term የሚሆን in the long term በጣም አንዱ የማይግሬሽን ፖሊሲ ኮንሲስተንስ ብዬ ለማስቀመጥ የሞከርኩት በተቻለ መጠን ሮል መሆን ያለበት ያው creating conditions like repeated የሆነ crossing of the state border እንዳልኳችሁ state border imagine በጣም ቀላል አይደለም። ተወጣለ ፓስፖርት ይመጣል ምናምን ፖሊሲ ያ እንደዛው ይችላል even for repatriating incomes by virtue of their work የሚመጣውን income like encourage የማድረግ even for administrative procedures necessary even when migration break even sometimes the law or like that አሁን ያላችሁት ነገርና it's a very interesting area, a very nice intervention point even for academicians and researchers to bring really a change on this area. The other thing is the foreign technological policy. I think you can read on this one. one of the most interesting policy is, for example, when you say foreign technological policy, always remember, when you say policy, it means the role of the state, the influence of the state on the transfer of like technology, like can be like intellectual knowledge gained in basic and applied research policy. እኔ አሁን ያሳተምኩት ወደ 24 25 አርቲክል አለ። ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ሆኜ የትኛውንም በነፃ ዳውንሎድ ማድረግ አልችልም። $60-30 የራሴን እንኳን ማለት ነው። because I have to respect that policy. but ለዛ ያለው ግን ሲታተም አንድ ለኔ ይሰጠኛል። እኔ ግን ያችን የተሰጠችኝን የራሴን አርቲክል የታተመችዋን ያው ኢትዮጵያ ስለሆነ ነው እንጂ ዲስትሪቢዩት ላደርግ የምችለው ሌላ ጋር እኔ የተሰጠኝ ነው የራሴ ያሳተምኩት ነው ብዬ አውሮፓውያን ዩኒቨርሲቲ ውስጥ የራሴን እንትን ምክንያቱም አታሚ ሌላ አካል ስለሆነ ማድረግ አልችልም። because the students should buy that. For this, almost all European countries have signed an agreement, okay? That's an intellectual knowledge that's gained through what? It can be basic research or applied research. እንግዲህ ትንሿ ነው ማለት ፔፐር ማተም it's nothing ትልቅ ነገር ነው አይደለም ግን እስከዚህ ድረስ ነው የሚገቡት። በጣም plagiarism is crime. The first thing that you learn on the first day of orientation to any of European countries is about plagiarism. Plagiarism is crime. I remember one of our friends who crossed one of the strict area in university and his PC was being scanned. PC scanned በሚደረግበት ጊዜ ለሴኩሪቲ ማአት እዚህ በክራክ ያወረዳቸው ሶፍትዌሮች ምናምን ተይዞ ልጁ መጨረሻ ላይ እስከ ኢትዮጵያ ኤምባሲ ድረስ ተወስዶ በቃ ይቅርታ ተደርጎለት እንደውም በህግ ፊት በፖሊስ ፊት ሆኖ በሙሉ ዲሞሊሽ አድርጎ የሆነ ፎርም ሞልቶ ነው የሄደውና አንዳንድ ጊዜ ኬር ማድረግ አለብን። አንዳንድ ሶፍትዌሮች ለምሳሌ ዘን ሙቭ ስናደርግ ወደ ሌላ ሀገር ምናምን ኤርፖርት ሁሉ የሚታሰሩ ሰዎች አሉ። ለምሳሌ ዳውንሎድ ያደረጋችሁት መጽሐፍ ሳይቀር ሴንስ እያደረጉ ከየት አመጣው ክራክ አድርገህ ነው ምናምን በጣም because they say that we have to protect what? We have to protect that knowledge that's gained through basic or applied science. And then we have to really formulate policies that really enable to this one. And you can bring it to the context of Ethiopia. So what's important in this case is one, the case of technology transfer. The other thing is how should be the cooperation of certain Ethiopian universities, let's say, some institutions in that country, with other institutions in the other country, permanent cooperation. Who will say what? Can they really say that we can do like this? Let's say University X cannot make an agreement like I will really send you this university department, it will send you this much kilogram of leaf for a kind of experiment for Mr. X who is doing his PhD in, let's say, in Tokyo. This is not allowed. There are a number of acts like the Science and Technology Minister, what they should sign in እዚህ ላይ ትንሳማው ቤተር ነው ያስባለው ግን ወደ ሀገር ውስጥ በመናመጣው ግን we are not that much like ባለፈው የነገርኳችሁ ለምሳሌ ማለት ክላስ ውስጥ አንስቼ ሊሆን ይችላል like የሞባይል ራዲዬሽን ኢንዴክስ did I tell you that? Yeah like there are the SAR index or the RAR index. Do we have that? We don't have that. If you go to many European countries, they say whatever type of mobile technology that will be produced, let's say in Singapore or somewhere, they will check it and they have that policy. Not only checking it, you will check it if you have the policy. They already say the maximum SAR index or RAR index so that which mobile is of that and like that, they will check it. If something really explodes, that company will be totally banned because it has health-related issues or like even a single mobile issue. That's one. The other thing is a number of like detergent materials. There are a number of detergent materials that are really entering into Ethiopia, but most of them they are banned in many of the European countries. I really get surprised. Even like የቻይልድ ጌምስ የህፃናት መጫወቻዎች ፕላስቲክ ጌምስ አሁን in any European አካባቢ ban. There should not be any child game product that's made from plastics. Do you know that? So governments are encouraging this by wood or clay or like ምክንያቱም በጣም ከባድ የሆነ ፒግመንትስ የተገኘበት ካንሰር ኮዚንግ ማቴሪያልስ ስለተገኘበት በአሜሪካም በተለያዩ ሀገሮች ኦልሬዲ ፕሩቭን የሆነ ማቴሪያል ነውና እኔም ኖርማሊ በነገራችን ላይ ፕሮባብሊ ኢትዮጵያ is እና ኬንያ ሊሆን ይችላል እንደዚህ አይነት በፕላስቲክ ይሄን ራሱ this is not allowed in many of the European countries. They wrote it this is a recyclable material እና definitely በዚህም ሊቀጥል አይችልም በዚህ ሪስትሪክሽናችን ሰማው በጣም ሎው ስለሆነ ህጋችን አንዳንድ ኢንቨስተሮች በጣም መጥተው ለተወሰነ ጊዜ ለማምረት ሁሉ የሚፈልጉበት ሁኔታ አለ ወያን they are banned from some countries they are coming so ይሄን ሁሉ ይዛል technology it has it has a character to be related with other foreign policy laws please try to read that one ለምሳሌ genetically modified ኢትዮጵያ እንደፈረመችም የሚወራ ነገር አለ I'm not quite sure እሱን ቼክ አድርጉና ከዛም እናገኘው ምንድነው ከዛስ መጣት እንችላለን ነው አድቫንቴጅስ አለ ወይ ያው እኔ ምንድነው I'm not totally against it but when we have to use it our farmers ማሰብ አለብን and then once the GMOs really invaded us a number of nice climate change resistance seeds we are really losing them now the farmers are really totally becoming dependent on these corporations that will supply this credit this has agricultural ጋር በተያያዘ በጣም foreign agricultural technology ጋር የሚያዝ ነገር አለ ከሄልዝ ጋር የሚያዝ ነገር አለ ከቴክኖሎጂ ከዚህ ከትምህርት ወይም ደግሞ ከሞባይሎች ጋር የሚያዝ ነገር በጣም ብዙ መስራት ያለበት ዩኒቨርሲቲዎች መንግስትም ይሄ ላይ ቢዚ ምንሆንበት ታይም ነው ያለነው ባይዞ for example GMO ወደ ሀገር ውስጥ ሲመጣ genetically modified ያልሆነ ሰው ኢንተረስትድ የሆነ ሊበላ ይጠቀም ይችላል ምክንያቱም it's very the population is maybe increasing and we are scarcity of food not only Ethiopia but also Americans they are doing that if we are avoiding GMO we cannot have adequate food we can't feed our nations ያሉበት ያለው የአውሮፓ ህብረትን በመታየበት ዘመን totally GMO thing is totally banned I really like that why they really invest much on those other materials so that they can own Americans እና በአውሮፓ ማለት በጣም ከፍተኛ የሆነ ዲቤት ያለው እዚህ ላይ they say that and they have proven that that's not really good so they are really encouraging organic production they are really like that and አብዛኞቹ ፕሮፌሰሮች ይላሉ but we are too late ይላሉ ደረጀ we are too late what happened ምን ዋጋ አለው because we already lose our soil is totally exhausted soil እውነታቸው by the way they really do that ስለዚህ ኢትዮጵያ ደግሞ GMO ቢመጣም እንደውም ማረር ያለባት በሌላው ላይ ነው GMO እኔ አፕሪሺየት አላደረግም በሌላው ላይ ካፒታላይዝ አድርጋ ኦርጋኒክን የተጠማ ዓለም እያለ ባለበት በጂኤምኦ እየጮህ ባለበት ሀገር GMO ላይ ስቲክ ማድረጉ I don't think that is really እንደውም we will have a specialized organic products and then we can really send them GMO ነው ያመጡት በነገራችን ላይ ልንገራችሁ ኢትዮጵያ GMO የመጠቀም ቻንሷ በጣም ሎው ነው ነገር ግን ኢትዮጵያ ምን ማድረግ ትችላለች መሰላችሁ GMO አፕሩቭ ስላደረገች አብዛኞቹ ፕሮዳክቶቿ ኦርጋኒክ ስለሚሆኑ ነን ኦርጋኒክ የሆነውን ዓለም ፓወር ይዛ በጣም ዶሚኔት ማድረግ የምትችል ካፓሲቲ ነበራት ያ እንዳይተደረግን ምንድነው የሆነው እኔ የመለካከት ነው GMO ፈርማለች no so what special from Ethiopia ይላሉ ግን ከኢትዮጵያ የሚነገረው በዚህ ወቅት እንኳን ትላንት ዶክተር አብይ ምናልባት ሲናገር ሰምታችኋል በዚህ ወቅት እንኳን ኤክስፖርት የምናደርገው ሚት ዋይዝ ስላልሆነ ነው እንጂ እጅግ በጣም በሌላ ሀገር የሚፈለግ ሚት ነው አሁን እየተከሰተ ካለው ዲዚዝ ራሱ ናቹራሊ ነገሮችን መብላት የሬዚስታንስ ካፓሲቲ ኦፍ ፔሸንትስ በጣም ይጠያል በጂኤምኦ ያደገ ፍየል ለታማሚው ለኮሮና ታማሚና ኦርጋኒክ ያደገ ለተቋም በፍጹም they do not have the same resilient and then cure እና ብዙ ውስጥ ገባው so what I am saying is we have to check and recheck it by the way we should not accept as it is የሆነ ነገር ስንቀበል የሆነ ነገር ሊያሳጡን እንደሆነም መጠርጠር አለብን በያስባለሁ I think this is all about the technological issue we can have a lot migration policy ላይ የሆነ ትንሽ ደባልቃለው by the way B ላይ አምጡት I made a mistake here I'm really sorry you can have ሎንግ ተርም ማይግሬሽን ፖሊሲ ሾርት ተርም ላይ ሎንግ ተርም ላይ ያው ከኤጁኬሽን ጋር በተያያዘ ለምሳሌ ከበጣም ሃይሊ ስኪል ኢሹስ ከዚህ ላይ የኢንዲያን እና የኢትዮጵያን እንዲሁም የአሜሪካን ኤክስፒሪየንስ ማየት ይቻላል። በጣም ሃይ ሌቨል ስኪሎች ላይ ነው ይሄ ላይክ PhD ኦር ላይክ ICT አሁን በጣም በብዛት ወደ ካናዳ ምናምን አካባቢ ታዩ ከፍተኛ የሆነ የማቴማቲሽያንስ and then የኮምፒውተር ስኪል ያላቸው ሰዎች በብዛት እንትን የሚባሉበት ጊዜ አለ። ሌላው ግን ብዙም ይሄን ያህል የሚፈልግበት አልነበረም። በጣም ተመራማሪ የሆኑ ሰዎች ምናምን like that even me by the way I have tried and I got it but I don't want to go there እና ስለዚህ ብዙ ነገሮች አሉ እዚህ ላይ so long run migration policy በብዛት በሂውማን ሪሶርስ ዴቨሎፕመንት ጋር የተያያዘ ነው። ሾርት ተርም ማይግሬሽን ፖሊሲ ግን በሲዝናል ሌበር ሾርቴጅ ጋር ተያይዞ የሚመጡ እንትኖች ናቸው ማለት ነው። አንዳንድ ጊዜ እነዚህ ፎሪን ፖሊሲስ ዴቨሎፕ ሲሆኑ የዶሜስቲክ ፋክተሩን አፌክት በማያደርግ ሆኖ መሰራት አለበት ማለት ነው። I can tell you for example some companies we are teaching the same course as you in any government university we get the same course. And then even sometimes you can lead them, even sometimes they don't know how to do that. I tell you, Ethiopian professors do that. But the salary that are being paid, we are not jealous of them by the way, but the fact is like 12 times of the salary of the Ethiopian professor. So what do you say? We are living in the same country or like that. So sometimes is a foreign policy in Antunu, Kagarus, Kaloga, የማጣጣም ነገር ቢሰራም በጣም አስፈላጊ ነው ማለት ነው። አንዳንድ ጊዜ ኢትዮጵያ ደግሞ ትንሽ ከረር ይላል። የኔ ጓደኞች 2-3 መኪና ነው ይዘው የገቡት ማስተርሳቸውን ተመረው እኔ 100% ክፈል ያው በጣም ብዙ ነገር so you are in the same continent but you can imagine how things are like that. So what I'm saying is እነዚህ ፖሊሲዎች ዲዛይን ሲደረጉ across regions across countries at least ተማጣጣኝ የሆኑ ስራዎች እንዲሆኑ የማድረግ ነገር ቢኖር አሪፍ ነው። The other thing is foreign service policy. When you say foreign service policy, it refers to the state's influence on trade in services between a given country and even a foreign country. It can have direct or indirect influence in original. For instance, like military units in terms of security service original, like peace mission original. Like in terms of technical communication, telephone, the computer, television or satellite, all this is what you call the foreign service policy. What are we getting and what are we losing in terms of all this and where is the balance in Milan Badam? ማየት ያስችላል ማለት ነው። ለምሳሌ ከድሮ ጊዜ ጀምሮ በፊት አካባቢ ስልክ ሲጠራላቸው አይታችሁ ከሆነ አንዳንድ ጊዜ ነው ነምበር ይላቸዋል። አንዳንድ ጊዜ ደግሞ የዛች አገር ዳይሬክት ቁጥሩ እናንተ ሞባይል ላይ ይታያል። አሁን do you get that? Of course you can get that, but sometimes ደግሞ በጣም እነዚህ ዋየርለስ በሆኑ ቴክኖሎጂዎች ሰዎች ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ሆነው ራሱ በዛ በውጭ ሀገር ያስሞሉና ኢትዮጵያ ቴሌኮሙኒኬሽን ብዙ ሉዝ አድርጎ ነበር። ግን በቅርብ ጊዜ በተደረገው ኮሬክሽን ኤቭሪቲንግ በኢትዮጵያን እንትን እንዲያልፍ የተደረገበት ሁኔታ አለና ብዙ ሜንሽን ማድረግ ይቻላል። So can you link it with Ethiopian space science policy? Is there, I am asking this, I hope you can go with that. The other interesting thing that we can finish it in the coming 5 minutes is types of foreign economic policy. Generally, we have 3 types of economic policy. Generalized scenario. One is the free trade approach, the protectionist policy. The protectionist is mainly towards the monopolistic one, and the other is sometimes the free trade can be made, sometimes the protections can be made. This is what we call it the mixed policy. So what is free trade policy? You can really get it, but I really emphasize on this one. Free trade, I really try to show here is the quantity of the good, and here will be the price, and then free trade zone. It actually shows losses in production and consumption in virtue of the introduction of import duties. Free by own restrict ይደረግ ምንድነው ዴድ ዌይት ሎስ ምናምን የሚባል ነገር አለ። እሱ ላይ በደንብ ካልተማራችሁ እዛ ላይ በደንብ አንድ ቀን ኤክስፕሌን ላደርግላችሁ ፈልጋለሁ። በጣም ኢንተረስቲንግ ነው። ለምሳሌ ትሬዱ ቢትዊን ቢግ ካንትሪ ኤንድ ስሞል ካንትሪስ when the trade is restricted with let's say world price, who will be the loser and like that. And then Zalebadam Maok Asfalgal. There are a number of graphs that are really very interesting in economy. I hope since you are economists, you know it. And then for this one, Ambabot, I try to scan this material, and then Ian was used but detail free trade even if it is somehow sometimes in theory because of the selfishness of many countries. The other thing is protectionist policy. Protectionist policy is the second types of international economic policy. Protectionist policy is international economic relations. It consists of the utilization by the state of means and instruments. There are some means and instruments applied by foreign economic policy. They can be like macroeconomic policy or some short-term temporary interventions to achieve the goals of this policy. So it depends on the goal of the country's foreign economic policy, either to apply free trade policy or protectionist policy. So protectionism is, foreign trade is sometimes a derivative of the policy of the state, what you call it, the policy of state intervention in the economy, but when it's extended to foreign market and how it leads to some type of monopoly on monopolized markets, and then under what conditions such types of protectionist policy should be advised and pursued. I hope you can read it. Definitely can do it. Generally, the mixed policy of the it depends on the time, regardless of the reshuffling of one policy to the other, then we can apply this mixed policy. So there are two extremes. One is the liberalism extreme, where it really advises free foreign economic policy. The other one is somehow too protectionist, what you call protectionism. If you see these two, in between the two, we can have like that, like some larger type of liberals, but somehow the third rank of protectionism, and then this one. So mixed policy means between these two. Okay, we can have like the L2P2 policy. So I think this is the discussion, and these are some of the issues that I want to ask you. Remember, we are on chapter 4, the foreign economic policy. A lot can be said. However, the predominant issues in foreign economic policy are significantly linked with international trade. Normally, most of them. You can talk about technology transfer, you can talk about whatever service, all these things. Almost 90% of the foreign economic policy is all about the foreign international trade policy. You can think of investment, because if the investor comes, once the investor got the investment license, definitely after that he will get a trade license. Investment license, trade license. So directly or indirectly, the significant part of the FEP or the foreign economic policy is related to the policy of international trade. Therefore, dear students, what do you think are the gains from trade? What do you get from trade? And what type of positive role can be played by states within that? How do you evaluate these gains from trade? Who will be benefited for what type of intervention or policy intervention? What are the policy implications of the various restrictions to foreign trade? I say it foreign trade because remember, it's foreign economic policy. I say 90% of the foreign economic policy is foreign trade. Therefore, I really appreciate your patience till now. And then I am sure I will tell you, maybe if I have time, I have my own nice lecture on international trade gains from trade and the policy effects of all this trade, with a nice and clean slides with a number of somehow graphs. I like graphs and equations normally. So next time, it doesn't mean that this is all about chapter 4. But before chapter 5, probably for 30 or 40 minutes, we will spend on this lecture, international trade, what are the gains from trade, and then what are the policy effects. Definitely you can rehearse it Of course, I know you have learned maybe certain course on that, but we have to relate is from policy perspective, from foreign economic policy perspective. And then this is all about for today. Definitely we will meet on Thursday, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have questions, comments for this fourth chapter, anything which is not clear for you, I can send you the fourth chapter now, just now. ያባለፈው ደርሷችኋል አይደል? ከ1 እስከ 3 ይችኛዋንም አሁን ልክላችኋለሁ። አንብቧት። ያልገባችሁ ነገር ካለ please don't refrain to ask me. I am ready to assist my students as much as I can, and I want to share whatever I have. I know there is time limitation እንጂ በጣም ብዙ የተሰሩ ስራዎች አሉ እዚህ ላይ። እናንተ ደግሞ ትንሽ መብራቱን ካሳየው በእርግጠኝነት ከኔ በለጠ እንደምትሰሩ ስለማምን አንብቡ። ኔክስት ታይም እቺኛዋን ፊፍዝ ቻፕተር ከመጀመራችን በፊት ግን ያንን የኢንተርናሽናል ትሬድ ላይ ትንሽ የምናየው ነገር ይኖራል። ምክንያቱም ፊልዳችሁ ስለሆነ እዛ ላይ በደንብ ኤክሴል ማድረግ ስለሌለባችሁ ስለምጠብቅ ነው። አንዳንዱን ኦልሬዲ ያወቃችሁትም ይሆን ስለሚችል በዚህ ቻፕተር ጋር የተያያዘ ልዘለው ይችላል እንደ ሁኔታው። ይሄንን ተምረናል የምትሉኝ ከሆነ definitely I can jump it, but I don't want to miss it because it's part of this issue. So thank you very much for today.
Thank you, Doctor.
ልዩነት መፍጠር ዓላማችን ነው። ዓለም አቀፍ ተወዳዳሪ መሆን አለባችሁ። የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ ጥራትና ደረጃውን የጠበቀ ስልጠና በመስጠት ብቁ ዜጋ እያፈራን ነው። በፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን፣ በበረራ መስተንግዶ፣ በቲኬቲንግና ሪዘርቬሽን፣ በሆቴልና ቱሪዝም ሙያዎች አሰልጥነን ተወዳዳሪ እናደርጎታለን። ኮሌጃችን ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና ከእንግሊዙ ICM ጋር በመተባበር ዓለም አቀፍ ዕውቅና ያለው ስልጠና እየሰጠ ይገኛል። በፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን፣ በበረራ መስተንግዶ የምንሰጣቸው ስልጠና ከኢትዮጵያ ሲቪል አቪዬሽን ባለስልጣን ሙሉ ዕውቅና አለው። አድራሻ ከጎላጉል ታወር 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ ህልሞን እውን ያድርጉ።